Okay, folks, welcome back to Realis Historia. This is the promised part 2, A Tale of Three Dictators, Hitler and the Death of Democracy, the hardest one for me to make. Now we move on to the next character. Now this guy didn't have to corrupt referendums or elections to get into power. He took advantage solely of political and social situations. It was a matter of coincidence, really, that assisted this guy in corrupting the democratic system. And we are talking about, of course, the biggest mass murderer in history. Let me introduce you again to Adolf Hitler. Now, he truly was an outlier at the time. He was considered a fringe fanatic until fate conspired to put the wrong man in the right place at the right time. Germany had just technically lost the First World War, and despite these signs here saying Germany surrenders, they actually only signed an armistice, which is an agreement to stop fighting, just like in the Korean War. So they were never really defeated on the battlefield. But technically, Germany had lost the war, and millions of disaffected German soldiers returned home. And Hitler was one of those soldiers. You can see him here on the left. Left Germany when it was a great power with an empire and came back to a broken land. And the embarrassment for Germany continued when the Treaty of Versailles was negotiated in 1919 and the Germans weren't even invited to the negotiations. In fact, the whole thing was settled by the so-called Big Four. David Lloyd George of Britain, who was merely interested in obtaining the German colonies in Africa and Southeast Asia, as well as dissecting the Southern Ottoman Empire, and basically ensuring that his number one rival in Europe, Germany, would not rise again. Next, there is Vittorio Orlando from Italy. He was interested in obtaining territories from Austria-Hungary, which in the end he didn't get, and this explains his flip, or Italy's flip, from World War I and the Allies to World War II and the Axis. Then there was Georges Clemenceau of France. He wanted Alsace-Lorraine back. He wanted to punish the Germans, who had been their mortal enemy almost the entire 19th century. So it was well in his interest that the German Empire be hobbled. Then there was Woodrow Wilson from the United States. He was mainly interested in establishing the League of Nations to prevent future wars in Europe, but the Congress eventually refused to let the United States join. He was one of the four who did disagree with the partition of German lands. And in the end, Germany was sliced and diced. Saarland was occupied by the French so that war reparations could be taken directly from the Germans. Alsace-Lorraine was transferred back to the French as well. This had swapped hands several times during the 19th century. Schleswig-Holstein was handed back to the Danish. Lower Silesia was handed over to the Polish for the creation of a new Polish state, along with the Danzig Corridor. And finally, the Memel territory was given to Lithuania. So now the stage was set for an even bigger war to come. All these territories contained substantial German populations, which would become a catch cry by Hitler and a call for war to bring back stolen German lands. When I can, I will introduce another video about who started World War II. Well, in my opinion, it was this four. Now Hitler returned to a divided country. Now the German Empire was gone, the Weimar Republic was established. The chaos caused by the crash of this empire created fighting in the streets between communists, Marxists and nationalists. A staunch nationalist, Hitler tied himself to a fledgling Nazi party, and in 1921, through the powers of his oratory skills, he became the leader. And now, with control of the Nazi party, Hitler got impatient of waiting for the nationalist revolution, and he took part of what was to become known as the Beer Hall Putsch, where in Munich he attempted to take over the Bavarian government with plans later to march on Berlin. Now, Hitler's attempted coup was an abject failure, simply because this was the wrong place and time. Hitler was sent to prison, and he took this time to pen his Mein Kampf, basically a blueprint for the Holocaust that was to follow. Now, mainly due to the connections of influential Nazis, Hitler only served 9 months, and he was then released. And it was during his time in the prison that he decided that he was going to do everything legal. And this is where his flirtation with democracy began. Now, initially, Hitler had a problem because his party was still fringe radical, very far-right radical, just like there were far-left radicals. So it wasn't considered a mainstream party. Additionally, after the initial crash of the German economy after the end of World War I, the Americans came in and started assisting Germany with war reparations and heavily investing in Germany. And the economy picked up, so the German population saw no need for radical ideas or radical changes. Suddenly, on Thursday, October 24th, 1929, everything came crashing down. The stock market in Wall Street lost 11%. This was followed by Black Monday and Black Tuesday, the first of Hitler's coincidental circumstances had begun. Soon there was a run on the banks as people scrambled to withdraw their cash before the banks went broke. Combined with a famine that was already occurring, the Wall Street crash created company closures and unemployment skyrocketed around the world. Now the US had no money to invest in the German economy, and the German economy slumped as quickly as the US and virtually mirrored it. Now one of the circumstantial events that would bring the Nazi Party to power had begun. Now Hitler's National Socialist Party, which had promised to make Germany great again and right the wrongs of the Versailles Treaty, started to look much better to the common German people. Hitler's fortunes were totally reversed, and now the rise of the representation of the Nazi Party in the Reichstag mirrored exactly opposite the crash of the German economy. Now what was once seen as merely fringe street rabble became mainstream acceptable in German society. Now, unlike Napoleon before him and Putin to come, which I'll explain soon, Hitler's process of perversion of democracy was very quick and not long and drawn out. Once Hitler's party, the Nazi Party, gained or became the largest party in the Reichstag, and do note it wasn't an absolute majority, the majority of Germans did not vote for Hitler. However, President Hindenburg really had no choice other than to declare Hitler Chancellor of the Reich, simply because it was the only way to form a viable government and end the electoral chaos that had existed in the Reichstag up until this time. Now Hitler would take his one and only chance to seize ultimate power. And the second circumstance occurred when the Reichstag mysteriously burned down, apparently at the hands of communists who were Hitler's biggest rival at this time. However, there has always been speculation that perhaps the burning down of the Reichstag was not as it seemed. After the fire, somehow Hitler convinced an ailing President Hindenburg to sign the Reichstag Fire Act. An emergency decree, the Reichstag Fire Act, removed all personal freedoms of speech and assembly. Soon, 4,000 prominent communists had been arrested. Now Hitler knew he had to work fast before the Reichstag woke up and saw the real danger. And he, feeling that the Reichstag Fire Act was not enough, he proposed the Enabling Act, the worst perversion of democracy. Somehow he got the even further ailing Hindenburg to sign the Enabling Act, which gave him executive, virtually dictatorial power without necessary reference to the Reichstag. In August 1934, President Hindenburg died. The last restraint on Hitler's ambitions was gone. Hitler quickly moved and passed a law and initiated a referendum where the German people would vote on combining the Chancellery and the Presidency into one office, the Führer. It passed, amazingly, by 90%. Again, we'll discuss that later. Hitler quickly used his new power to dissolve all other political parties, and Germany became a one-party state. Now that Hitler had total control over all German resources, he was free to unleash his armies across Europe, and one of the most vicious, inhuman calamities that could ever strike the human civilization was unleashed. Inhumanity beyond imagination. And anyone who offers any sympathy or any support for this horrid man, whose name I can no longer say any further, needs to hang their head in shame and kneel before the gates of Auschwitz and ask forgiveness. Okay, folks, that's the end of this one. Sorry about that little bit of emotion there. I had direct family who was lost in World War II defending Great Britain, so it's personal to me. Anyway, I do ask you to watch the next one, Putin, The Tale of Three Dictators, Putin, Hitler's Apprentice. I'm not quite finished yet. I'll finish it soon. Please watch that one too. Thank you.